The air in Washington grew heavy on December 23, 2025, as the United States Department of Justice executed the largest single release of investigative material in modern history. Triggered by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, this massive tranche of 29,000 pages and dozens of video files represents a watershed moment for a public long starved of the truth. For years, the name Jeffrey Epstein has been synonymous with a web of elite protection and systemic failure. But this release seeks to tear down the walls of secrecy once and for all. As the documents flooded the public domain, the sheer volume of data overwhelmed digital servers, revealing the internal mechanics of a multi-decade federal investigation that spanned several administrations. This was not merely a data dump. It was a forced reckoning mandated by a bipartisan legislative push to ensure that no stone remained unturned. Within these pages lie the raw, unvarnished details of how a billionaire financier operated a global network of exploitation while simultaneously rubbing elbows with the most powerful figures on the planet. From the halls of the Metropolitan Correctional Center to the private terminals of Palm Beach, the narrative of the century is finally being written in the government's own ink. Among the most scrutinized documents in this new release are the updated flight manifests and internal Department of Justice memos regarding President Donald Trump. While previous disclosures hinted at a social acquaintance, this tranche provides a far more granular look at their interactions during the mid-1990s. Federal prosecutors in a 2020 memo noted that Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet, the Boeing 727 known as the Lolita Express, at least 8 times between 1993 and 1996. This figure is significantly higher than what was previously entered into the public record during the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. One specific flight log from 1995 has drawn intense interest, as it lists only 3 passengers: Epstein himself, Donald Trump, and an unidentified 20-year-old woman. The Justice Department, anticipating the political firestorm this would ignite, took the unusual step of issuing a concurrent statement alongside the files. In it, they argued that many of these records contain sensationalist claims submitted to the FBI by political adversaries shortly before the 2020 election. However, the presence of official subpoenas sent to Mar-a-Lago in 2021 suggests that the legal interest in these connections was far more than just political theater. One of the most explosive items found within the 29,000 pages is a handwritten letter purportedly sent by Jeffrey Epstein to the convicted sex offender Larry Nassar. Dated August of 2019, just days before Epstein's death, the letter contains a chilling and direct claim that the president shared their specific illicit interests in young women. The inclusion of this document has ignited a fierce debate over its authenticity and its intended purpose. The Department of Justice has been quick to cast doubt on the letter, pointing to several forensic anomalies that suggest it may be a sophisticated forgery or a planted piece of disinformation. For instance, while Epstein was being held in a New York facility, the letter was postmarked from Virginia and featured a return address that did not align with his actual location. Furthermore, the letter was processed by the prison system after Epstein had already been pronounced dead. Despite these red flags, the FBI had requested a full handwriting analysis of the document as late as 2020, indicating that investigators were at least willing to consider the possibility that it was part of a larger, coordinated effort to communicate from behind bars. The mystery surrounding Epstein's final days in the Metropolitan Correctional Center continues to deepen with the release of internal prison logs and surveillance descriptions. For years, the public was told that the cameras outside Epstein's cell had malfunctioned, but this latest tranche includes a collection of video clips and internal communications that paint a more complex picture. Among the files is a controversial video clip showing a figure kneeling in a cell. However, the DOJ has clarified that this specific footage appears to be a digital fabrication that circulated on social media years ago, rather than authentic CCTV footage. What is authentic, however, are the internal memos discussing Epstein's housing arrangements. The documents reveal a startling lack of oversight, including a proposal by prison officials to house Epstein with Cesar Sayoc, the notorious MAGA Bomber. These records show a facility in total disarray, plagued by staffing shortages and a complete breakdown of standard operating procedures. The logs detail Epstein's erratic behavior in his final hours, his requests for specialized legal materials, and the frantic, disorganized response of the guards once he was discovered. These documents do not necessarily solve the conspiracy, but they prove that the negligence was far more systemic than initially admitted. As the primary accomplice in Epstein's network, Ghislaine Maxwell's communications form a significant portion of the December 23 release. The files contain a series of encrypted emails and handwritten notes between Maxwell and an individual she frequently referred to as the Invisible Man. Investigators have long suspected that this moniker, often signed with the simple initial A, refers to Prince Andrew of the United Kingdom. The emails detail travel arrangements to various private estates and mention the coordination of social events where young women were expected to be present. Unlike previous releases which were heavily redacted to protect diplomatic relations, these new files provide the specific dates and locations of these meetings. The correspondence suggests a level of intimacy and shared knowledge that contradicts the public denials issued by the royal family over the last several years. Furthermore, the files include internal FBI interviews with staff members who worked at Epstein's New York townhouse, many of whom describe the Invisible Man as a frequent guest who was given total autonomy within the residence. This evidence strengthens the narrative that Epstein's reach was global, utilizing the prestige of the British monarchy to insulate his illicit activities from local law enforcement. Perhaps the most damning revelation in the entire 29,000-page tranche is the evidence of how early federal authorities were alerted to Epstein's crimes. The files contain a 1996 FBI report that confirms the agency received a formal criminal complaint from Maria Farmer, one of Epstein's earliest known victims. Farmer's report provided specific details about the abuse she suffered at the hands of Epstein and Maxwell, yet the documents show that the investigation was closed almost as quickly as it began. This revelation suggests that the FBI had sufficient evidence to pursue child pornography and sex trafficking charges decades before Epstein was finally arrested in New York. The internal memos from the mid-90s show a shocking level of indifference, with one agent noting that the case lacked a high probability of conviction due to Epstein's high-profile connections. This failure to act allowed Epstein to continue his predatory behavior for another 20 years, creating a trail of hundreds of victims that could have been prevented. The release of these specific reports has sparked renewed outrage from survivor advocates, who argue that the government was not just negligent, but actively complicit in allowing Epstein's empire to flourish while ignoring the desperate pleas of his victims. The December release further confirms that Jeffrey Epstein's social circle was a literal who's who of global influence, spanning the worlds of politics, entertainment, and science. The documents contain photographs, dinner seating charts, and contact lists that include names like Bill Clinton, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Kevin Spacey, and Richard Branson. While the Department of Justice has been careful to state that inclusion in these files does not equate to criminal wrongdoing, the sheer volume of high-profile names illustrates the scale of Epstein's social engineering. The files detail how Epstein used his wealth to fund scientific research and arts programs, effectively buying his way into the most prestigious circles in the world. For many of these celebrities, Epstein was seen as a gatekeeper to a world of limitless resources and private luxury. The documents show that Epstein was meticulous about documenting his interactions, often keeping detailed notes on the preferences and vulnerabilities of his guests. This suggests that his social network was not just a hobby, but a calculated tool for gathering intelligence and ensuring that he remained untouchable. As the public combs through these names, the question remains how much these individuals knew about the dark reality of Epstein's private life. Despite the historic nature of this release, it has not been without significant controversy and criticism from across the political spectrum. Many lawmakers, particularly those who champion the Transparency Act, have noted that the 29,000 pages are still heavily redacted in key areas. These redactions often obscure the names of current government officials and the specific details of ongoing foreign intelligence investigations. Democratic leaders and some prominent Republicans have accused the Trump administration of slow-walking the disclosure and protecting certain allies from public scrutiny. Attorney General Pam Bondi has faced intense pressure to release the unredacted versions, with some members of Congress threatening to bring contempt charges against her if the full truth is not revealed. The Justice Department maintains that these redactions are necessary to protect national security and the privacy of innocent third parties. But this explanation has done little to satisfy a skeptical public. The tension between the executive branch and the legislature has reached a breaking point, as the fight for the Epstein files becomes a proxy battle for the broader struggle over government accountability and the limits of executive power in the 21st century. A unique aspect of the December 23rd release is the inclusion of digital forensics and metadata that provide a window into how Epstein manages finances and communications. The files include thousands of spreadsheets and bank records that detail the flow of money between various shell companies and offshore accounts. Investigators have used this data to track the movement of funds used to pay for private security, legal fees, and the maintenance of his various properties. This digital paper trail is crucial for understanding how Epstein was able to hide his assets from the government for so long. The files also contain information on Epstein's use of encrypted messaging apps and secure servers, showing that he was acutely aware of the risks of digital surveillance. Forensic experts are now analyzing the metadata of the newly released photos and videos to verify their authenticity and to determine when and where they were taken. This technical data is providing a more objective view of Epstein's operations, moving beyond hearsay and testimonials into the realm of hard, verifiable evidence. It represents the modern era of investigation, where the digital ghosts of a criminal enterprise can be resurrected years after the main perpetrator has passed away. As the world continues to digest the massive amount of information contained in this latest release, the focus is now shifting toward what comes next for the survivors and the pursuit of justice. The documents have provided fresh leads for investigators in multiple jurisdictions, and there is growing pressure for new grand jury probes into those who may have aided or abetted Epstein's crimes. For the victims, the release of these files is a bittersweet victory, providing validation for their stories while also serving as a painful reminder of the decades of silence they endured. The December 23rd tranche is not the end of the story, but rather a new beginning in the effort to dismantle the systems of power that allowed a predator like Epstein to operate in plain sight. As more documents are expected to be released in the coming months, the public must remain vigilant in demanding full transparency. The legacy of Jeffrey Epstein is a dark stain on the history of the American justice system, but the sunlight provided by these disclosures offers a path toward healing and reform. The truth is finally surfacing, and while it may be uncomfortable for the powerful, it is a necessary step toward ensuring that such a tragedy never happens again.